Jake Morrison closed the last file on his desk and placed it in the metal box. The human embassy on Nexus Prime Station had been his home for 8 years. Now he was packing everything away like it never mattered. His hands moved slowly as he wrapped each item in protective cloth. A photo of his wife and daughter went into the box first. Then his collection of alien art that he had bought from different worlds. Finally, the small Earth flag that had sat on his desk every day since he arrived. The other humans in the embassy were doing the same thing. They moved quietly through the halls, taking down pictures and removing personal items. No one spoke. Much. They had all received the same message from Earth 3 days ago. Pack up, come home. Do not explain why. Captain Lisa Hayes watched from the observation deck of the UES Horizon as more human ships arrived at the station. Cargo vessels, passenger ships, military escorts, and research vessels all gathered in the space around Nexus Prime. The human fleet was bigger than anyone had expected. Over the past 37 years, humans had built a large presence in this part of the galaxy. Now they were taking it all with them. Lisa had been born on this station. Her parents had been part of the first human delegation to join the Galactic Council. She had grown up playing with alien children and learning different languages. The station felt like home to her. But orders were orders. Earth wanted all humans to return, and they wanted it done quickly and quietly. Down in the cargo bays, workers loaded the last of the human equipment onto transport ships. Medical supplies, construction tools, computer systems, and scientific instruments all went into the ships. The humans had brought a lot of technology to the galaxy. Now they were taking it all back. Dr. Amy Rodriguez supervised the loading of her laboratory equipment. She had been working on cures for several alien diseases. Her research could have saved millions of lives, but her orders were clear. Pack everything. Leave nothing behind. Do not share the research with anyone. Amy felt bad about leaving her work unfinished. She had been close to finding a cure for the Zelanian plague. The disease had been killing people across 3 star systems. But Earth's government had made their decision. All human knowledge and technology would return to human space. The alien workers who helped with the loading looked confused. They had worked with humans for decades. Many of them had human friends, but the humans were not explaining why they were leaving. They just smiled politely and said they had to go. In the council chambers, the other species watched the human departure with growing concern. The Zephyrian representative, Council Leader Vexthal, had tried to speak with Jake Morrison several times. Each time, Jake had been polite but firm. The humans were withdrawing from all treaties and agreements. They would honor their current contracts but would not renew them. The Corvin delegate, War Chief Thekmor, seemed pleased by the news. He had never liked having humans involved in galactic politics. The Corvin believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. Humans were weak in their eyes. They preferred talking to fighting. Good riddance, he thought. But the Selthari representative, Prime Minister Yals, was worried. The Selthari had been fighting border disputes with the Corvin for years. Human diplomats had always helped keep the peace. Without humans to mediate, the conflicts might get worse. The Quantari delegate said nothing. The Quantari were a quiet species that rarely spoke in council meetings, but they had relied on human translation services for decades. The Quantari language was very difficult for other species to learn. Only humans had mastered it well enough to translate complex ideas. Jake Morrison walked through the station one last time. He stopped at the memorial wall where the names of all species who had died in galactic conflicts were carved. Many human names were on that wall. Human peacekeepers, diplomats, and aid workers who had given their lives to help others. Jake touched one of the names. Commander Dan Wilson, who had died protecting a Zelanian colony from pirates. The man had been Jake's friend. The station felt different now. The human sections were empty and quiet. The restaurants where humans had worked were closed. The schools where human teachers had taught alien children were being cleaned out. The medical center where human doctors had treated patients from dozens of species was packing up its equipment. Jake met with the station administrator, a tall, blue-skinned Alterian named Quextal. The administrator looked tired and stressed. He had been trying to figure out how to replace all the human services on the station. Ambassador Morrison, Quextall said, surely you can tell me something about why your people are leaving. We have been allies for decades. Jake looked at the administrator with sad eyes. I'm sorry, Quextall, I really am, but I have my orders. The human government has decided to withdraw from galactic affairs. That is all I can say, but what about the trade agreements? The research projects? The peacekeeping missions? All. Human commitments will end according to the terms of our contracts. We will not abandon our duties suddenly. But we will not renew any agreements or start new projects. Quextall ran his hand through his hair. This will cause problems, many problems. Jake nodded. I know. But the decision has been made. The loading continued for 2 more days. Human families said goodbye to their alien neighbors. Human workers finished their final shifts. Human students left their schools. Human doctors transferred their patients. To alien colleagues who were not as skilled or experienced, the economic impact was already being felt. Human banks were closing accounts and transferring funds back to Earth. Human trading companies were canceling orders and breaking contracts. Human insurance companies were stopping coverage for alien businesses on the 3rd day. The human fleet was ready to depart. Over 300 ships of various sizes filled the space around Nexus Prime. It was the largest human fleet anyone had ever seen assembled in one place. Captain Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon and looked at the Station 1. Last time, she had many friends there. She might never see them again, but her duty was to her own species now. Earth had called, and she would answer. Jake Morrison was the last human to board a ship. He carried his metal box and walked slowly toward the transport. A small crowd of aliens had gathered to watch him leave. Some of them were crying, others looked angry. Most just looked confused. As Jake reached the transport, Vexthal approached him one final time. The Zephyrian leader looked desperate. Ambassador, please, tell me what we did wrong. How can we fix this? Jake stopped and looked at Vexthal. For a moment, his professional mask slipped, and the alien could see the pain in his eyes. You did not do anything wrong, Vexthal. That is the problem. You did not do anything at all. Before Vexthal could ask what that meant, Jake boarded the transport. The doors closed, and the ship moved away from the station. The human fleet formed up in perfect formation. The User Horizon led the way, followed by the other military vessels. The cargo ships and passenger vessels followed behind. The entire fleet moved as one unit, like a single organism, the jump drives activated simultaneously. Bright flashes of light filled the space around Nexus Prime as the human ships entered hyperspace. Within minutes, they were all gone. The space around the station was empty except for a few alien patrol boats. On the station, the remaining species stood in silence. The humans had left without explanation, without drama, without threats. They had simply packed up their lives and departed. Somehow, that made it more frightening than if they had left in anger. The age of human involvement in galactic civilization was over. What would happen next? Nobody knew. 3 months had passed since the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace. The Galactic Council still met every week in the same chambers on Nexus Prime, but the meetings felt different now. The human seats sat empty, covered with white cloth. No one wanted to remove them completely, hoping that somehow the humans would return. Admiral Steve Collins stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the stars in the Outer Rim territories. His ship patrolled the edges of what used to be called neutral space. Now it was simply human space. The borders had been redrawn after the Exodus. Earth's new government had claimed several systems that humans had discovered but never officially colonized. Steve's communication console blinked constantly with incoming messages. Alien governments, trading companies, and individual citizens all tried to contact the human fleet. The messages piled up faster than his staff could read them. Most were desperate pleas for help. Some offered money. Others promised trade deals. A few were angry demands for explanation. Steve read none of them. His orders from Earth were simple and clear. No contact with alien species, no responses to communications, no assistance of any kind. The age of human involvement in galactic affairs was over. On Nexus Prime, Chief Administrator Quextall worked 18 hours a day trying to keep the station running. The problems had started small but grew bigger each week. The translation systems that humans had maintained began showing errors. Important documents were being mistranslated. Trade agreements were being misunderstood. Diplomatic meetings were becoming confused disasters. The medical center was in crisis. Dr. Amy Rodriguez and her team had been treating the most difficult cases. They had experience with diseases from dozens of different worlds. The alien doctors who remained were skilled, but they did not have the same broad knowledge. Patients were dying from illnesses that humans could have cured easily. The Zelanian plague was spreading faster now. Without human medical research, the disease moved from system to system. The Zelanians had sent desperate messages to every human. Ship their scouts could find. The humans did not respond. The plague continued to kill thousands every day. In the council chambers, the weekly meetings had become shouting matches. The Corvin and Salthari representatives argued about border disputes that had been quiet for years. Without human mediators, old conflicts were returning. War Chief Thekmer demanded that the Salthari stop expanding into disputed territory. Prime Minister Yals accused the Corvin of planning military action. The Quantari delegate had stopped attending meetings entirely. Without human translators, no one could understand what the Quantari were saying. The other species had tried to learn the Quantari language, but it was too complex. The Quantari felt ignored and insulted. They withdrew from most council activities. Trade was suffering badly. Human shipping companies had handled 30% of all cargo moving between systems. Their ships were faster and more efficient than most alien vessels, now that cargo was not moving at all. Supply shortages were appearing on dozens of worlds. Prices were rising as transportation costs increased. The banking system was in chaos. Human banks had been the most stable and trusted institutions in the galaxy. They had financed major construction projects, provided loans to growing businesses, and handled currency exchange between different species. When the humans left, they had withdrawn all their financial support. Construction projects stopped. Businesses failed. The galactic economy began to collapse. On the mining world of Kepler-7, the human mining operation had provided jobs for 10,000 alien workers. The humans had built schools, hospitals, and homes for the workers and their families. When they left, they took all their equipment and shut down the mines. The workers were left with no jobs and no way to support their families. The planetary governor, a Veltarian named Zixco, sent message after message to human authorities. He begged them to return or at least to sell the mining rights to another company. The humans never responded. The planet's economy crashed. Families who had lived there for generations were forced to leave and find work elsewhere. Similar disasters were happening across the galaxy. Human-built factories shut down. Human-designed systems failed without proper maintenance. Human-trained workers could not find replacement jobs. The species that had benefited from human presence were discovering how much they had depended on it. The educational system was falling apart. Human teachers had been working in schools across hundreds of worlds. They had taught alien children about science, mathematics, and technology. They had also taught them about cooperation and peaceful problem-solving. The alien teachers who took over were not as skilled or experienced. Students were learning less. Some schools closed entirely. The scientific research programs were in ruins. Humans had been involved in almost every major research project in the galaxy. They had been studying everything from new energy sources to faster-than-light travel. When they left, they took their research with them. Projects that had been running for decades were abandoned. Years of work were lost, Captain Lisa Hayes commanded. A patrol fleet in the Andromeda approach. Her ships watched the edges of human space, making sure that no alien vessels entered without permission. So far, no one had tried to force their way in. But Lisa could see alien ships gathering just outside the boundary. They were watching and waiting. The alien ships did not attack. They just followed the human patrols from a distance. Sometimes, they would broadcast messages asking for talks. Lisa's crew could hear the desperation in the alien voices. But they had their orders. No contact meant no contact. Lisa thought about her childhood on Nexus Prime. She remembered playing with alien children and learning about their cultures. She had alien friends who were probably wondering why she had left without saying goodbye. Part of her wanted to respond to their messages, but she was a military officer. She followed orders. The Council's attempts to replace human services were failing badly. They had hired the best alien experts they could find, but it was not enough. The humans had been involved in so many different areas that replacing them all was impossible. The aliens were discovering that humans had been the glue that held galactic civilization together. War Chief Thekmur was pleased by the chaos. The Corvin had always believed that the galaxy was too peaceful. Conflict made species stronger, in their view. With the humans gone, the Corvin could expand their territory without interference. They began moving military ships toward the borders. With Selthari space. Prime Minister Yal saw the Corvin ships massing and ordered her own military to respond. The Selthari had always been more defensive than aggressive, but they would not allow the Corvin to invade their territory. Both sides began preparing for war. Other species watched the growing conflict with fear. The Altarian Federation called for peace talks. The Veltarian Union offered to mediate. But without human diplomats to guide the process, the talks failed before they started. No one trusted anyone else to be neutral. The communication networks that humans had maintained began breaking down. Messages took longer to reach their destinations. Some were lost entirely. The different species started having trouble coordinating their activities. Trade agreements were missed. Diplomatic meetings were canceled. The galaxy was becoming disconnected. On Earth, President Helen Morgan read reports about the galactic situation. The reports came from human intelligence agents who had been quietly watching alien space. The news was exactly what Earth's government had predicted. Without humans to maintain stability, the alien species were falling back into old patterns of competition and conflict. Helen felt no satisfaction in being right. She had hoped that the aliens would prove more capable of cooperation, but the evidence was clear. The galaxy was heading toward chaos, and there was nothing humanity could do about it now. The decision to leave had been made, and there was no going back. The second phase of humanity's departure from galactic civilization was complete. The immediate crisis had begun, and it would only get worse from here. 6 months after the humans left, the first shots of the Corvin-Selthari War were fired near the disputed planet of Raxes IV. War. Chief Thekmur had ordered his fleet to take control of the planet's valuable mining stations. The Selthari garrison tried to resist, but they were outnumbered 3-1. The battle lasted only 6 hours before the Selthari forces surrendered. Prime Minister Yals received the news while meeting with her military advisors on the Selthari homeworld. The room fell silent as the communication officer read the report. Raxes IV had been under Selthari control for 20 years. The Corvin attack was an act of war. Within hours, Selthari battle fleets were moving toward Corvin space. The peace that had lasted for decades was broken. Other species watched in horror as two of the galaxy's major powers prepared for full-scale war. The conflict would not stay contained to just these two species. Dr. Amy Rodriguez worked alone in her new laboratory on Research Station Alpha, deep in the Andromeda approach. She had been trying to continue her work on the Zelanian plague from memory, but she was missing crucial data that had been stored in the computers on Nexus Prime. The plague was spreading faster than ever, and she was running out of time to find a cure. Amy's personal computer showed dozens of messages from alien scientists begging for help. Some offered to share their research. Others promised to fund her work if she would return to Council space. A few threatened to reveal her location to other humans if she did not respond. Amy deleted all the messages without reading them completely. The plague had now reached 17 star systems. Entire planets were under quarantine. The Zelanians themselves were dying in massive numbers. Their government had collapsed as their leaders succumbed to the disease. Refugee ships carrying infected Zelanians were being turned away from every port in the galaxy. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council was falling apart. The weekly meetings had become shouting matches between species that blamed each other for the crisis. The Altarian Federation accused the Veltarian Union of price manipulation. The Quantari had stopped sending representatives entirely. The smaller species were choosing sides in the growing conflict. Chief Administrator Quextall had not slept properly in weeks. The station systems were failing one by one. The environmental controls needed constant repair. The power grid was unstable. The water recycling system was producing contaminated water. The humans had maintained all these systems so quietly that no one had realized how complex they were. The economic collapse was accelerating. Without human shipping companies, cargo was taking 3 times longer to move between systems. Food shortages were appearing on worlds that had never experienced hunger. Medical supplies were running out in hospitals across the galaxy. The currency exchange rates were wildly unstable. The Corvin war machine was growing stronger. War Chief Vekmar had used the chaos to recruit soldiers from dozens of desperate worlds. Unemployed alien workers joined the Corvin military in exchange for food and housing. The Corvin fleet was larger than it had ever been. The Salthari were struggling to match the Corvin expansion. Their economy had been built on peaceful trade, not military production. Prime Minister Yals ordered the conversion of civilian factories to military use, but the process was slow and expensive. The Salthari were falling behind in the arms race. Captain Lisa Hayes received new orders from Earth while patrolling the outer boundaries of human space. Her fleet was to move further away from the galactic core. Earth's government wanted to create a bigger buffer zone between human territory and the war that was spreading across alien space. Lisa's communication officer reported that alien ships were trying to follow the human fleet. The ships were not military vessels. They appeared to be civilian refugees trying to escape the conflict. Lisa's orders were clear about what to do with aliens who entered human space without permission, but these were not invaders. They were families running for their lives. The refugee crisis was becoming massive. Millions of aliens were fleeing their homeworlds as the war expanded. The Corvin-Salthari conflict had drawn in their allies and trading partners. The Altarian Federation was supporting the Salthari with weapons and supplies. The Valtarian Union was providing fuel and raw materials to the Corvin. Smaller species were being forced to choose sides or face economic isolation. The Rigelian Collective joined the Salthari Alliance after Corvin raiders attacked their merchant ships. The Tau Ceti Commonwealth supported the Corvin. After the Salthari imposed trade sanctions on their goods, the fighting was spreading to dozens of systems. What had started as a border dispute was becoming a galaxy-wide war. Ancient grudges between species were being reopened. Old territorial claims were being pressed. The careful balance of power that had kept the peace was completely destroyed on Earth. President Helen Morgan met with her cabinet to discuss the worsening situation. Intelligence reports showed that the galactic economy was in freefall. Industrial production was down by 40%. Agricultural output was dropping as farm workers were drafted into military service. Millions of aliens were facing starvation. The president's science advisor, Dr. Tony Baker, presented a disturbing analysis. The alien species were not just failing to replace human services. They were actively making things worse by competing with each other instead of cooperating. The war was destroying infrastructure that had taken decades to build, Helen's military advisor, General Ryan Cooper, reported that alien fleets were gathering near the borders of human space. The ships were not taking aggressive positions, but they were clearly trying to establish contact. Some were broadcasting messages asking for human intervention in the war. The messages were desperate. Alien leaders were begging humans to return as mediators. They promised to give humans better representation in the council. They offered exclusive trade deals and access to alien technology. Some even suggested that humans should take leadership roles in the galactic government. Helen listened to recordings of the alien messages. She recognized some of the voices. These were the same leaders who had dismissed human contributions for decades. They had treated humans as useful assistants rather than equal partners. Now they were discovering what they had lost. The infrastructure failures were cascading across the galaxy. The communication networks that humans had designed were breaking down without proper maintenance. Planets were losing contact with their governments. Trade routes were being abandoned as navigation systems failed. The galaxy was becoming fragmented and isolated. Educational systems were collapsing. Schools that had been built with human assistance were closing. Universities were losing their best professors as aliens fled to safer worlds. The next generation of alien leaders was growing up without proper education or exposure to other cultures. scientific. Research had almost stopped entirely. The major research stations were in war zones or had been abandoned. The collaborative projects that had advanced galactic civilization were dead. Medical research, space exploration, and technological development were all grinding to a halt. The environmental damage was becoming severe. Industrial accidents were more common without human safety experts. Pollution was increasing as alien governments focused on war production instead of environmental protection. Several worlds were becoming uninhabitable due to poor resource management. Dr. Amy Rodriguez made a breakthrough in her plague research, but it was too late. The cure she had developed required specialized equipment that only existed in the laboratories she had left behind. She could not produce the medicine in sufficient quantities to stop the epidemic. Millions more aliens would die while she watched. Helplessly. The Galactic Council held its final meeting 6 months and 3 weeks after the human departure. Only half of the member species sent representatives. The others were too busy fighting or had withdrawn from galactic affairs entirely. The Council voted to dissolve itself and transferred its remaining authority to individual species governments. The age of galactic cooperation was ending. The war continued to spread, consuming resources and lives. The aliens who had once dismissed human contributions were learning the true cost of their arrogance. But it was too late to fix their mistakes. The galaxy was breaking apart, and the humans were gone. 1 year after the human exodus, the galaxy was burning. The Corvin-Salthari War had spread to 63 star systems. 8 different species were now fighting on one side or the other. The death toll had reached into the billions. Refugee ships drifted through space, looking for any safe harbor they could find. Council leader Vexthal sat alone in his private chambers on what remained of Nexus Prime Station. Half the station had been evacuated when the power systems failed completely. The other half was running on emergency power that would last maybe another month. Vexthal had refused to leave. Someone had to try to fix the disaster that the galaxy had become. He spent his days writing messages to human authorities. Every message was the same: a plea for help, an admission of guilt, a promise to do better. Vexthal had sent over 200 messages in the past year. Not one had received a reply. The humans were not ignoring the aliens. They were simply not listening anymore. The Zilanian plague had killed 40 million people. Entire worlds were empty now, their populations wiped out by the disease. The few survivors lived in isolated settlements, afraid to have contact with outsiders. The Zilanian species itself was nearly extinct. Only a few thousand remained, scattered across the galaxy in small groups. Dr. Amy Rodriguez worked frantically in her laboratory in the Magellan clouds. She had finally perfected a cure for the plague, but she had no way to distribute it. The medicine required special storage conditions that only human technology could provide. Even if she could produce enough doses, there was no safe way to deliver them to the infected worlds. Amy's computer showed a new message from an unexpected source. The message was heavily encrypted and had been routed through dozens of relay stations to hide its origin. When she decoded it, she found a desperate plea from her former colleague, Dr. Zektar, a Rajulian scientist who had worked with her on the plague research. The message contained detailed scans of infected patients and samples of the plague virus. Zektar was begging Amy to share her cure, even if it meant breaking Earth's isolation policy. Entire species were dying, and Amy had the power to save them. But helping would mean disobeying direct orders from Earth's government. Amy stared at the message for hours. She had taken an oath as a doctor to help all patients, regardless of their species. But she had also sworn loyalty to Earth and humanity. The two commitments were now in conflict, and she had to choose which one mattered more. Chancellor Kim Patterson received a similar message at her research station in the Outer Rim. The message was from Vexthal himself, sent through secret channels that even Earth's intelligence services might not detect. The Zephyrian leader was offering something that no alien government had ever offered before: complete surrender of authority to human leadership. The message was stunning in its honesty. Vexthal admitted that the aliens had been wrong about everything. They had treated humans as servants instead of partners. They had dismissed human contributions while taking all the benefits. They had been arrogant and foolish, and now they were paying the price. Vexthal's proposal was simple. If humans would return to the galaxy, they would be given complete control over all major decisions. No more council meetings where every species had equal votes. No more committees where human proposals were ignored. Humans would be the acknowledged leaders of galactic civilization. Kim read the message 3 times before she believed what she was seeing. The same aliens who had spent decades treating humans as junior partners were now offering to become junior partners themselves. The irony was almost too much to bear. The galactic economy had collapsed completely. The major trading routes were controlled by military fleets. Merchant ships were being seized by pirates or destroyed in battles. The currency system had broken down as governments fell and new ones rose in their place. Most worlds had returned to barter systems or simple resource trading. The Corvan Empire was winning the war, but the victory was costing them everything. War Chief Vecmar had conquered dozens of worlds, but he could not hold them. The Corvan military was spread too thin across too many systems. Local rebellions were breaking out everywhere. The Empire was becoming too large to govern effectively. Prime Minister Yals had been killed in a Corvan bombing attack on the Selthari capital. The new Selthari government was led by General Kexener, a military commander who believed that the only way to defeat the Corvan was to use their own brutal tactics. The war was becoming more savage with each passing day. The smaller species were being crushed between the two major powers. The Rigelian Collective had lost half its territory to Corvan forces. The Tau Ceti Commonwealth was facing a massive refugee crisis as billions of aliens fled the war zones. The Alterian Federation was spending all its resources on weapons and had nothing left for basic services. Captain Lisa Hayes received urgent orders from Earth while patrolling the edge of human space. A large alien fleet was approaching the human border. The fleet was not in attack formation, but it was too large to ignore. Lisa's orders were to intercept the fleet and determine its intentions without allowing it to enter human space. The alien fleet was led by a massive diplomatic vessel called the Redemption's Call. The ship was broadcasting messages on all frequencies, asking for permission to speak with human authorities. The messages were signed by representatives of 12 different species, including some that had been enemies for generations. Lisa positioned her fleet between the alien ships and the human border. She opened a communication channel and demanded to know what the aliens wanted. The response came from Admiral Quinder, the former station administrator who had been promoted to lead the desperate diplomatic mission. Quinder's message was simple and direct. The aliens were formally requesting human intervention in the galactic crisis. They acknowledged that they had been wrong to dismiss human contributions. They admitted that they could not solve their problems alone. They needed human help to save what remained of galactic civilization. The alien fleet carried representatives from every major species in the galaxy. They had put aside their differences and united for one purpose: convincing humans to return. The same species that had been fighting each other for months were now working together in a desperate attempt to fix their mistakes. Lisa listened to the alien proposals with growing amazement. They were offering humans complete control over galactic defense forces. They promised to fund human research projects without question. They agreed to accept human decisions on all major policy issues. They were essentially offering to surrender their independence in exchange for human assistance, but Lisa's orders were clear. No alien ship was allowed to enter human space under any circumstances. The aliens could make their speeches and offers, but they could not force humans to listen. Lisa politely informed the alien fleet that their messages would be forwarded to Earth's government, but no immediate response would be given. The alien fleet waited at the border for 3 days. More ships arrived from across the galaxy, carrying additional representatives and more desperate offers. Some aliens offered to share their most advanced technology. Others promised to give humans exclusive access to valuable resources. A few even suggested that humans should take over their governments entirely. On the 3rd day, Lisa received new orders from Earth. The alien fleet was to be turned away immediately. No negotiations would be considered. The aliens were to be informed that humanity's withdrawal from galactic affairs was permanent and irreversible. Lisa delivered the message to the alien fleet with a heavy heart. She could hear the desperation in the alien voices as they begged for reconsideration. Some of the aliens were crying. Others were angry. All of them were terrified of what would happen when they returned to their dying civilizations. The Redemption's call and its escort fleet turned away from the human border and began the long journey back to the galactic core. The aliens had played their last card and lost. There would be no human rescue. The galaxy would have to face its future alone, but humanity was not finished with the galaxy yet. Earth's government was preparing for the next phase of their plan. 2 years after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council no longer existed. The great station at Nexus Prime drifted empty through space, its lights slowly dying one by one. The galaxy had broken into dozens of small territories controlled by warlords, surviving governments, and desperate alliances that formed and dissolved like shadows. General Ryan Cooper, now Earth's Minister of Defense, sat in his office reading the latest intelligence reports from the former council space. The data painted a picture of complete societal collapse. Industrial production had fallen to levels not seen in centuries. Space travel was dangerous and unreliable. Entire worlds had gone silent, their populations either dead or cut off from galactic civilization. The Corvin Empire had shattered into 3 warring factions after War Chief Thekmor was assassinated by his own generals. The Selthari Republic existed only on paper. Their remaining territories were controlled by local military commanders who fought each other as much as they fought external enemies. The dream of galactic unity was dead. Ryan turned to the next report in his stack. It detailed the refugee crisis that was spreading across human space. Alien ships appeared at the borders every day, carrying survivors who had nowhere else to go. The ships were usually damaged and low on supplies. Their passengers were often sick or injured. All of them were desperate. The human border guards followed their orders and turned the refugees away. But Ryan could see the strain it was putting on his people. Many of the guards had grown up with alien friends. They did not enjoy watching families die in the cold of space because they were not allowed to enter human territory on New Geneva Station. Humanity's new capital in the Outer Rim, President Helen Morgan addressed the Colonial Council. The meeting was being broadcast to human settlements across their expanded territory. Helen's message was simple. Humanity had made the right choice in leaving the galactic community. The evidence was overwhelming. In the 2 years since the Exodus, humanity had thrived. Their technology had advanced rapidly without the need to share discoveries with other species. Their economy was stable and growing. Their people were safe and prosperous. They had everything they needed in their own space. Helen showed the Council detailed comparisons between human and alien territories. Human worlds had clean air and water. Alien worlds were polluted and diseased. Human space was peaceful and secure. Alien space was consumed by war and chaos. Human civilization was advancing. Alien civilization was collapsing. The colonial representatives listened to the president's speech with mixed feelings. Most agreed that leaving had been necessary. The aliens had never treated humans as equals. But some questioned whether humanity had a moral obligation to help the suffering species, even if those species had been unfair in the past. Dr. Amy Rodriguez had made her choice. Working alone in her laboratory, she had produced enough plague medicine to treat 1 million patients. She could not transport it to alien space without violating Earth's isolation policy. But she could leave it where someone else might find it. Amy loaded the medicine onto an automated cargo ship and programmed it to drift toward the edge of human space. She made sure the ship's location would be detected by alien scouts. She did not send any messages explaining what the ship contained. She simply gave the aliens a chance to save themselves if they were smart enough to investigate. The ship was discovered 3 days later by a Rigelian patrol vessel. The aliens found the medicine and quickly realized what it was. Word spread quickly through the remaining alien territories. The cure for the Zelanian plague existed, and it had come from a human source, but the medicine only treated the current outbreak. It did not provide immunity against future versions of the disease. Without human research support, the aliens could not develop a permanent solution. They could only treat the symptoms while the plague continued to evolve and spread. Jake Morrison, now Director of Colonial Affairs, worked from his office on New Geneva Station. His job was to manage humanity's expansion into new territories. The humans had claimed several star systems that had been abandoned by their alien inhabitants. The worlds were rich in resources and perfectly suited for human colonization. Jake's desk was covered with colonization reports and territorial surveys. The humans were building cities on worlds that had once been home to thriving alien civilizations. The previous inhabitants had fled or died during the galactic collapse. Their abandoned infrastructure was being dismantled and replaced with human designs. One report caught Jake's attention. It described a Veltarian world called Haven 7, where human colonists had found evidence of a massive evacuation. The aliens had left behind schools, hospitals, and homes. They had abandoned everything in their rush to escape the advancing war. Now human families were moving into houses that still contained alien children's toys and family photographs. Jake felt a moment of sadness reading the report. He remembered the alien children he had known on Nexus Prime. He wondered where they were now. Were they alive? Were they safe? Did they remember their human friends who had left without explanation? But Jake pushed the emotions aside. His job was to serve humanity's interests, not to worry about aliens who had never appreciated what humans had done for them. The galaxy had made its choice when it dismissed human contributions. Now humanity was making its choice by claiming the rewards of their own hard work. Captain Lisa Hayes commanded the human defense fleet that protected the new colonial territories. Her ships patrolled the borders of human space, watching for any signs of alien intrusion. So far, most of the alien ships they encountered were refugees seeking sanctuary. But Lisa knew that could change if the alien wars expanded further. Lisa's communication officer reported daily alien broadcasts asking for human assistance. The messages came from the remnants of alien governments, desperate military commanders, and civilian leaders trying to hold their societies together. All of them offered everything they had in exchange for human help. Some of the offers were remarkable. The surviving Altarian leaders promised to give humans control of their most advanced shipyards. The Quantari offered to share their secret language and cultural knowledge. The remaining Selthari territories promised to become human protectorates in exchange for protection from the Corvin factions, but Earth's government had made its position clear. No deals would be made with alien species. No assistance would be provided. No exceptions would be allowed. Humanity's future lay in their own space, not in trying to save aliens who had never learned to save themselves. The final message came from Council Leader Vexthal, transmitted from a dying ship somewhere in the ruins of former Council space. The Zephyrian leader was among the last survivors of his species. The plague and the wars had killed most of his people. The few who remained were scattered across the galaxy with no hope of rebuilding their civilization. Vexthal's message was different from all the others. He did not ask for help or make offers of alliance. He simply apologized. He admitted that the aliens had been wrong about humans from the very beginning. They had failed to recognize human value until it was too late. They had lost everything. Because of their own arrogance and blindness, the message ended with a simple statement: the aliens deserved their fate. They had been given the greatest gift in galactic history, partnership with humanity, and they had thrown it away. Now they would face the consequences of their choices alone. Jake Morrison received Vexthal's message at his office on New Geneva Station. He read it slowly, remembering the proud alien leader who had once dismissed human diplomatic efforts as unnecessary interference. Now that same leader was dying alone in space, finally understanding what his species had lost. Jake set the message aside without responding. There was nothing to say. The time for words had passed 2 years ago when the human fleet had jumped away from Nexus Prime. The aliens had learned their lesson, but they had learned it too late. Outside Jake's window, construction ships were building new cities on worlds that had once been alien colonies. Human children played in parks where alien children had once learned about friendship and cooperation. The future belonged to humanity now, and humanity had no intention of sharing it with species that had never learned to share with them. The galaxy had made its choice. Now it would live with the consequences forever.